All right, Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Hey guys, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we've noticed that your article's got some traction. It's got a quote from a lunatic in it. So you're messing around with crazy people here.
You have Joe. You have no idea what you got yourself into. Okay,
I
this
can't
So
wait. Yeah, what's going to happen? Are we going to do
this
some
this guilt
party
by
tricks and stuff?
it's guilt by association. May
I
come
so
back
cracked
to
a
bite
beer. I cracked a beer just in case,
oh,
we're
okay.
sort of
there you
relaxing.
Yeah. Well, we're having to pre-record this because Joe wasn't available to be with us live. So
go.
I'm not going to start drinking just yet. Um, so I saw
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I saw the survey when it first went out. I think I got an email, and I thought, well, I'll put some information in here. And it would I be accurate in saying that my comment about when all the idiots that bought $250,000 trucks went out of business, we'd be okay? Is that kind of what got your attention?
That is literally what got my attention. Yeah, and just for like some context, if people don't know what we do, I mean, potentially there are drivers out there who like receive these emails or whatever. But right, we do these surveys pretty regularly. Some of them are sponsored, some of them are not. This one was not. Sent this out to people's inboxes, and it's like, oh, take this about owner operators. And right, the last question on it was like, if there's anything else you want to say, if you want to be contacted for an article, go ahead and write it in here. And yeah, your comment, I can probably pull it up, honestly. When all the fools that bought $250,000 trucks in the inflated market go broke, we will increase. Chris Polk, Blue Ribbon Logistical Solutions. There you go.
Well,
The origin.
let me interject something. Normally, that word "fools" would have started with an F, but it would ended with a D. Okay, so you got the sterilized version of
I
that.
did.
But
I
I
did
believe
give you
it.
the family friendly version. Well, listen, on this show, we have not been shy about our opinion over the last couple of years. That while we all enjoyed the up market, and we certainly cashed all the checks, this was coming. What goes up must come down. And if you look at a little bit of historical perspective of the trucking industry over the last 25 years or so, you're going to see boom and bust and boom and bust. And this was coming. And, we were going, look, guys, um, you cannot overbuy a truck, even though, how badly you want to get into the industry. You cannot spend $250,000 on a truck and hope to still be in business 2 years from now. And I don't know if you're aware of this statistic. I should know where we got this, but I don't. 95% of first-time owner operators fail in the first 2 years, and that's a big number. But they all fail for the same reason. So you're a researcher, so I'm assuming you're a little bit of a nerd, kind of like we are. Um, are you finding in your responses to this survey, are you finding? I want to think how I want to word this question. Are you finding that the people that are expressing the concern, do you think they know why they have this concern?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. I should say first too, right? As you noted, I'm a researcher, and I've only been in the industry for 5 years, which is I know a lot less than a lot of people who are out there listening, I imagine. And so, right, take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt. I try to rely on the responses I get from people like you, Chris, right? And so also, if I say something that a listener disagrees with, really you're disagreeing with Chris. So just keep that in mind.
we're not
Um,
used to that. That never happens. Okay.
anyway, right. So I do think that there is an element of uh, sort of when you're in the midst of something like when you become an owner operator. This is just the sense that I got from the survey, and things get bad. Like let's say this is your first downturn or whatever. Let's say you bought in at the high point in the market. I think that there probably is an element of confusion as to why this is happening. Um, and yeah, I don't know that it's always clear what that fix would be for owner operators, uh, because successful owner operators are not necessarily what like they are good for the individual, and not necessarily the best thing for like the largest companies, right? So that there would be an interest in not necessarily providing those tools, right? So I think there is sort of an element of that for sure.
One thing that we see, and Larry calls it an entitlement. There's kind of an entitlement mentality that says, well, I bought a truck, so therefore I am worth, and then enter the dollar amount per mile or per day or per week, or and that's just not true, because you're only as good as your service, And so my truck, my $5,000 truck, will hook to the same kingpin that your $250,000 truck will do, and it will do the exact same job, maybe even more reliably. But I can't say that, oh well, I demand $4 a mile, because you just can't, So we come at it from the other end. We know what the fuel cost is. We know what the maintenance cost is. We know what the fixed and variable expenses should be, and we know what the floor is, and so we can operate at a much, much lower cost per mile. And then we get the kind of
well, let's don't say we
Go
can. We can't. We choose to operate at a much, much lower cents per mile. That's the whole point that we're making here, is that there was a choice when you decided to get into business. There was a choice whether or not to go buy a $20,000 truck or buy a $200,000 truck. That was a choice. So when you made that choice, you established the floor. Okay, we just made a different choice. Going back to the reason that people buy trucks, and Joe, to bring you in on our philosophy here, truck drivers by and large are miserable people. They choose to be a truck driver because they like to be alone. They don't want to work with other people. So they have a personality already of being independent. But the independence that they have in that 6x6 cell is strongly tied to people that they grow a dislike to, because they're management from remote, because they have a fleet manager, have a safety director, they have a blah, 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 name it all, okay, and a wife usually sometimes. So they're not necessarily independent. They can look out the windshield and they're in a different place every day, but that continued desire for independence doesn't go away. And in the 14 hours a day that they are conscious and are thinking about all the things that they're miserable about, the conclusion they come to is that if I own this truck, then I could make all these decisions myself. And so there is the impetus to make this decision. Now, again, for the most part, and I'm not going to paint everybody with this big broad brush, but for the most part, because 95 of 100 fail, so the huge majority of people who do this have no experience in running a business, have no experience in starting a business, have no experience in making business decisions, don't like business decisions being made, because that's why they don't like the people that are making them for them now. The first thing an owner-operator does is take the speed limiter off his truck that the fleet had on there. First thing he does, okay? So they unharness all these controls that give them this freedom. And then at some point in time, they realize that, wait a minute, those controls were there for a reason, and whether or not they want to accept that and become business people, or they're going to stick with it and stay ignorant, that drives that 95% to where it is. The lack of awareness, or once they are aware, lack of embracing it and understand that this is not about what I did before. What I did before is I delivered freight. Now what I do is I have to run a business, and number one, I don't like it, and number two, I don't know anything about it. So let's establish that you can set the floor, because that's how you set the floor. People get into this thing out of desperation because they want to escape. They want to get away from the chains and bonds and things that they feel like they're on them from being controlled by their handlers. Okay. But they don't realize that those same binders are now placed on you by, number one, your customer, and number two, the market demand. This entitlement thing, they think that somebody out here decides what the freight rate is. And they think that somebody is a broker or a manager or somebody. They don't understand that rate's set by the market. the free market. The whole thing that makes this thing work is what a customer is willing to pay and what a shipper or a carrier is willing to carry it for. That's what sets the market, the rate. And the vast majority of people have no clue how that works. They have no clue that the problem with rates right now is because everybody and their uncle got in the trucking business in 2021 because you could do anything and make money until you couldn't. So now we have this capacity that's completely out of equilibrium with the demand. And so unfortunately, this with the circle of life that has to go on here, a lot of those people have to go away. They will go away. And your article certainly illustrates that or explains that very, very well. There's nothing that can be done to stop that natural phenomenon from happening. It's the survival of the fittest. That's just how it's going to have to be. You cannot artificially make those rates high enough for those people to stay in business, because who's going to pay them? I can open up a McDonald's across from McDonald's and call it Ronald's and make my hamburger $15. That doesn't mean people are going to come in there and pay it. But if I'm a truck driver, I go do that and I demand that you come pay that because I decided to buy the McDonald's. That's the fallacy and the problem that we face in this industry.
Yeah, there seems, well, in my limited experience, there seems to be a level of this desire for autonomy, but that desire for autonomy does not also always come with an acceptance of the responsibilities that that autonomy now requires of the person, right? And I think that is the confusion.
They want a complete free market when the market's good, and they want a totalitarian oligarchy when it gets bad, because somebody's got to come fix all my problems. They want absolute totalitarian, authoritarian control. Somebody's got to fix these brokers. Okay, well, who exactly? Because you say you want freedom to do what you want to do so that you can ride it up, but then when it goes down, well, somebody's got to fix this. And so it's kind of this yin and yang, this bipolar nature of the industry, because they want both. They want freedom and totalitarianism. It's like, honey, you can't have it. I want to ask this question, and so the article says 35.2% of self-identified owner-operators checked, if the market does not rebound materially by the end of 2023, I will leave the industry. We see the trend that generally when the cycle flips, it throws off about 25% of capacity. I'm wondering if, because you guys at Freightwaves have got unbelievable amounts of data, with sonar and all the different stuff you're doing. And I'm wondering if that correlates to that normal 25 or 30% that gets thrown out anyway. Do you think those are maybe the same overlap?
Yeah, that another great question. I think that would make sense. I mean, I hesitate to give a super firm, confident answer on there, but that would make a lot of sense. I mean, one of the things that I was hoping to get into a little bit more with the article, and maybe will somewhere down the line, is really sort of get into what it would mean if this amount of owner operators left the industry or whatever. It's not the easiest thing to get that data, because it's is it net revocations? What would the data set be that you're going to determine sort of the owner operators leaving the industry? I know I talked to OIDA for the article too, and they obviously have their own member data that they can track, and that gives a snapshot of the market. But there's not a single source where it can be this is all the owner operators, and here's the movement. But yeah, I mean, I think that potentially, right, maybe this 35% came in a little higher than what you noticed. Mm-hmm. Or what you noted, the 25 to 30%. Maybe it's just because, right, that market in 2021 was so good that you had that extra bump there. And
it was the biggest year in the history of trucking. Yeah. Okay, and so there probably was a lot more new entrants than ever before. I would have to say that. I don't have that number, but I read maybe in your article, I read there were 700,000 new single truck authorities granted in 2021.
Yeah, that wasn't not in mine, but yeah, I mean, it was
I
dramatic
remember
for
reading,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Something like that.
I've read that recently. That there are 700,000 new single truck authorities. So there's probably never been that number before. So the failure rate has to go up percentage wise, Chris, because the 35% is reflective of the number of the hugeness, the largeness of the data set.
I mean, anecdotally, just from my own personal observation, I have witnessed a couple of times where, because a lot of people in the industry will see a problem, and then the immediate thing is I need to blame government, I need to blame brokers, or I need to blame the big carriers. Okay, well, when you understand that the big carriers all added up together are a pretty small player. I mean, they're not a huge portion of the trucks on the road. But what I do see happen is I had a dedicated customer that I worked exclusively with for like almost 8 years. I'm on a first name basis with the shipping manager. And there was an instance where the market had cooled off. I think this was 16. And the market had cooled off, and so rates start dropping, and he had other lanes that he had rebid, and a carrier, not a big carrier, probably 100 trucks, had come in and underbid everybody to get this business. So I'm standing in his office one day. I'm like, so, hey, man, how's it going? He's like, oh, and he's mad. And I'm like, well, what's going on? We delivered windows, like house windows, okay? And he tells me that a customer comes in and finds windows laying in their parking lot inside the gate. So they go to the security footage and they see that the truck pulls up. They're not open yet. Driver opens the back doors, throws the windows across the gate, glass. They didn't break, and then drives off. And he said, man, every time this market falls down, I get suckered into these low rates, and I get these idiots, and then, it clears out, right? So if there's a like kind of predatory nature, it's always in the bottom. But I've never been concerned because I've always made my service so excellent that they'd cut 10 cents. They'd cut me 15 cents, but they were never cutting me $1. They could never underbid me enough to outweigh the value of my service. And I think owner operators would understand that if you'll just make yourself more valuable as a servant, yeah, you might have to cut your rate 15 or 20%, but you're still going to be too valuable for the bad guy, whoever the bad guy is, whoever you identify as the boogeyman, to come in and completely take your business because you're too valuable. And then they get suckered into this, well, I'm a trucker and brotherhood and all this bullshit, and they're not focusing on the customer. So I said all that to ask the question about the people that reported numbers to you. How confident are the numbers, like for expenses and stuff, are you with the data that you received? Or maybe the data that you had outside of your survey, like with sonar and stuff.
Yeah, I feel very confident in the data, and OIDA just released some survey results today, I believe, and they had I think they had we had about 95 owner operator respondents. They had, I think, a couple hundred, 200-300, something like that, and the sort of gross pay data was roughly similar, roughly the same, I should say. Not the kind of thing where it's like, oh, this is way off, like we can't use this, I feel pretty confident in it. I think it makes sense that the people who say that they're on the cusp of leaving the industry saw their expenses grow as much as they did year over year. Maybe they have looser control over those expenses. They're not approaching it, with this sort of like operational efficiency mindset that you all seem to preach. And And yeah, so I feel pretty confident about it. But actually, I mean, I should ask you, what do you think about the data? Does this feel correct to you, like based on what you know of the industry? Where do you think its shortcomings are?
Best question is best for Larry. The one thing I would say is that I wonder if part of that increase in expenses was people going and buying too much truck.
Well, but everything's gone up. I mean,
True.
expenses have gone up. I mean, not just fuel, but everything has gone up. So I mean, expenses are up. There's no question about it. You know, even people that made similar profits in 2022 and 20, similar revenue, the profits are down because the cost of doing things is so much more expensive. You know, especially when you get into the employee market. Because, you know, everybody in 2021, most fleets gave 5, 6, 7, 8 raises that year to keep the drivers that they had. Well, you just can't go and take those away. You know, that sets that floor that is very, very difficult to pull back on. So I would, now again, we're not a big fleet and we don't pay like that. You know, we do a profit sharing kind of pay. But the fleets, that has to be a huge thing in an industry that's already working on a very, very, very small margin. You know, 1.5%, 2%. You know, so then you throw in maintenance cost. You know, I would say with trucks costing what they do now, fleets that used to run for 400,000 miles and trade them are probably keeping them longer because the entry price of replacing them. And so now they have out of warranty repairs that they didn't have before when they got rid of them at 400,000 miles. So it's going to be hard to compare that because it changed so differently in 2021, 2022. You know, I think we're going to see all these numbers skew a little bit over what we've, you know, historically watched them do in the past, you know, 2 or 3 decades. So, you know, I think it's really going to be hard, I think, to predict this until we get a little more time for this thing to settle out. You know, I mean, look, the truck prices are already weighted. You know, if you bought a truck in 2021 and even if you paid money down, you're underwater because that truck is not worth anything close to what you paid for it, you know. So that's a huge problem. I mean, all these guys that over leveraged that to begin with, and now they can't even, if one of those trucks gets wrecked, they're not even going to get enough money to pay the loan off, you know.
Right.
So there's so many landmines that we're dealing with, you know, and again, all of these are choices, Joe. They're all choices, you know. I'm not a truck guy. I've been in trucking since 2008, completely by accident. And I'm not going to go into all that here because it's well publicized. But you know, I've done a lot of it. I started in business in 1977. Okay. So I've done a lot of things and know a lot about how businesses work, especially small business. And so the way that we do things is how most business people outside of trucking would do it. We do that in trucking and we're called lunatics, you know. But everywhere else we're you know, any other boardroom we look normal, okay, except in trucking, you know. So it wasn't a decision that we're going to come in the trucking industry and do things in a lunatic way. That's just how I came into the business. You know, this is how I started my business with, you know, paying cash and not buying new stuff and really, really working on cost of things, fuel being number one. It's your number one cost. It's the easiest cost to manage. Okay. Easy. I can take anybody that wants to come to me. I can cut their fuel cost 20-25% probably in a couple of weeks, you know, and identify where the money's going. All right. So, but that was our culture to start with, you know. We just brought it to trucking. So many guys don't even understand that that's important. First of all, they don't think they can control it. And number 2, they don't know how, because they can't let the what Chris calls the BSE 9000. Chris, hold it up so Joe knows what we're talking about. They can't make decisions with that. They have to make decisions with emotion, you know, or with feeling, or don't make it at all. Hey, I'm out of fuel. I need to buy fuel. And the guy passed the best fuel on the road today 200 miles back and drove right by it because he didn't need it at that time. But now he needs it, so he's got to buy it where he is. You know, just this lack of understanding that all these attention to details are how you lower that cost of doing business. That's how. And in 2021, when things were outstanding, we just put a ton of money in the bank. And where a lot of guys, and again, I'm going to speak for Landstar because that's where we are, always have been. A lot of Landstar guys just slow down. They could make the same money pulling 1.7 loads as they could pulling 4 loads. So why pull 4? Let's just pull 1.7 and make the same money and good. And now they have to pull the 4 loads to make the money.
And they don't know how.
And they don't know how. And so they could have done that then. They wouldn't be in that situation right now because they, again, lack of understanding that this is typically an 18 to 24 month cycle. We've been on it for about 5 years because of the convergence of a lot of things, you know.
Yeah.
And we were in it long enough, Joe, that a lot of people who came in the industry thought that was what it was like. You know, listen, we talked to a lot of really, really smart guys that have got some money that got in the trucking business and knew nothing about it, but they saw it as a you know, somebody sold it to them as investment, and now they have no clue what to do with this fleet because there's nothing they can do to make it work, you know. And so, but at that time, everybody thought this is just how this is going to be. Come in and pay all this money for a truck, and we're going to get $4, $5, $6, $8 a mile. No big deal. Easy to find. At that point in time, you could pay drivers whatever the hell they wanted. You can get as many of them as you want. And so it's and it just has crumbled, you know. And we, you know, I've only been in it since 2007, 2008, but I see that this is not. We're not in a recession from a freight rate standpoint. We're just back to normal. It's just that everybody's business model came up and started up here to where normal now is really recessionary to them, you know. So I don't know if I answered anybody's question, but that's my little soapbox.
It gave me an idea. If you want a hell of a survey, all right, you need to survey all the doctors, dentists, accountants, and lawyers that in the last 24 to 36 months have bought trucks, and go survey them, because you want to talk about a misery index. These people are miserable because, like he said, their buddy walked up to, hey man, let me tell you what, you got some money? Let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to buy some trucks. All right, we're going to make all this money. And now they are losing their minds. They're going, oh my God, how do I get rid of these trucks? And I got to deal with these trucks. It's not funny, but it's kind of funny.
Well, and they're still, I mean, I read them on Facebook every day. You know, these investment opportunities in the trucking business, the greatest business to invest in right now, the trucking business. And I just look at that and I can't, you know, I mean, it's all I can do to keep from laughing, you know,
yeah, well, it's a tough business. I mean, I do not have a ton of experience in it, and that's abundantly clear to me that it's not for the faint of heart, and you got to go unprepared, you know.
You say that, and for the most part, you're right. But you know what I found, of all the things I've ever done, this is the easiest way to make money I've ever done. I mean, really, I've done a lot of things. And this business is if you compare that to all the things I've done, for a business person, you know, that does it right, look, you have an automatic customer base. Okay. You don't have to advertise for your product. All right. You don't, and if you do it the right way, you don't have to invoice and chase customers and chase money, you know. I mean, there's everything that most businesses do. You don't have to do it in trucking if you do it the right way, you know. Now, a lot of guys don't do it the right way. They want to be independent and have their own authority. Now they have to be in the business of chasing money. So what do? They factor and give it all away. It's payday loan. Okay. Probably shouldn't say that for you, because you guys probably are sponsored by a factoring company, but I despise them. You know, they're nothing but loan sharks. But again, it just goes back to lack of sophistication and intellectual
laziness.
Well, yeah, just not understanding that when you buy a truck, you're starting a business, and if you've never done that before, you're going to make a whole lot of mistakes, you know, and unfortunately, they're pretty fatal. You know, when you default on a $250,000 note, or these walk-away leases that I keep hearing about, that I've never ever read that word ever in a lease, but yet everybody that signs one tells me they were signing a walk-away lease. except I've never been. Nobody could ever produce one that said you could walk away. Um,
You need to run away.
and so the consequences of this are, I mean, it's serious. It's serious business. It's so easy to get into them that it seems like it ought to be easy to get out. I put on my conspiracy theory hat here a little bit too, because see, I think all this, the lease purchase thing is just a way for the fleets to solve their driver retention problem. If I can sign you to a contract and hold your feet to the fire and make it miserable for you to leave, or if you do decide to leave, you leave the owner operator world and come back to the company driver world, I've kept somebody in my seat. I don't have to go recruit that guy again, so it's, it's just one of those follow the money things, what better deal for a trucking company than to lease trucks to their owners? Because now they have all the maintenance costs transferred to the driver. All the operating cost, all the risk is now transferred to the driver. They get the benefit of hauling the freight, and there's no benefit package now. That the employee package went away. It is a great deal for a fleet, for a carrier. Not so much for the driver.
Well, this sort of makes me wonder also, like, because right, we're talking about how you got into the industry in 2007, 2008, and culturally there was not a whole lot of this kind of like financial pragmatism or like being on top of your expenses and approaching things like a business person. And it makes me wonder, like, where the root of the culture comes from. Like, why is it that it is not more common in trucking for people to think like this? Do you guys have any ideas as to why that would be? Because I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know.
I think you got to go back to where I said the evolution of this comes from. Truck drivers by and large. Now, again, I know some truck drivers have PhD, so don't take this the wrong way. But most people who sit in a seat of a truck are not highly educated, and even if they are, they're certainly not experienced in business. Okay, yeah. They do it because they love the life. So I don't think they start out thinking that they're going to be in business. That's something that they think of going down a road as a resolution to the things that they dislike about this job or this career that they've settled on. This would be the Xanadu of my driving choices I made, if I can make those choices. Because at that part in their career, their job is to hit the dock, get unloaded. I mean, it's very simple, honestly. One of the things that I found most simple about doing this, from coming from a business background, is that I could just hook up. I can back up and get loaded. I can drive a day or two and deliver this freight back up to a dock, and I push a button and I'm paid. That's all there is to it. I mean, how easy can this be?
No yellow pages.
Right. I didn't have a yellow page ad. Yeah. And that's no inside joke, but so a driver can kind of get lulled into the idea that this is an easy business, and it is. But I had lots of business background. Okay. For somebody that's never done any of this stuff, and they don't really, and the other thing is, most people that do this don't have credit, don't have cash, so they have to go do it in a situation, and the lease purchase is the darling of that situation, because if you can fog a mirror and sign your name, you own that truck. Well, you don't own it, but you drive in that truck tomorrow. Okay. And lease purchases by and large are very, very, very slanted against the leaser. They're all slanted toward the leaseor. And so it's a quick fix. And of course we have a quick fix society now. Everything has to be done right now, so
I can speak because he's telling my story, right? High school education. I didn't go to college. I didn't have anything better to do. And somebody's like, "Why don't you go drive a truck?" Okay. But I had no no practical experience. My dad graduated high school in 1957. He had business math, right? We barely got math, just straight math, right? So I end up in the industry, and there comes a point where I said the only way that I can increase my income so that I can achieve the objective, which was for my wife to not have to work outside the home and us homeschool our kids, one income family, I have to buy a truck. Well, I no longer believe that, because if I would have just recognized that there are company jobs, but you have to go look for them, you have to value yourself, you have to specialize, you have to do something different than just backing up to the dock, right? So that's what led me in. And because I had, found people like Dave Ramsey and motivational, and I'd learned some stuff about business, I did okay until the point that I could not outwork my bad decisions. And that, I think, it's a fundamental education problem all the way down to kindergarten, that we're not teaching people that bad decisions equal bad outcomes. And you can kind of sugarcoat that however you want to, but the bullshit Eliminator 9000 here doesn't lie. The TV will lie to you, and the Google will lie to you. That will never lie to you. It will tell you the truth every single time. But we don't kind of have that. So, well, we got to wrap up. So before we do that, any other insights that you want to share with the audience about your article and any other projects you got going on?
Yeah. So, maybe not necessarily any insights about this specific article, although I encourage everyone to go read it if you haven't. There's some good stuff in there. There's a good quote from Chris Polk. But moving on, one of the projects that I'm most excited about, that maybe won't be directly adjacent to people listening to this podcast, but we're going to have a company driver pay guide come out. And some of our guys with Back the Truck Up are going to bring a survey specifically for drivers to Matt's. And I'm really excited to see what we have there, because I think it's going to give an interesting look into like what company drivers are being paid now after, as you were saying earlier, Larry, all these pay raises happened right during the pandemic time. So very excited about that. Hopefully we'll get some good insights from it.
It would be nice, to go back to that 12 days in 2020 that everybody was thanking us for our service. That was cool. It lasted about 2 weeks, and then they're like, screw y'all, you're in my way.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I know you're not going to be at Matt's personally, although I wish you could be, but Freightwaves is going to be there. Do you have any knowledge of where their booth is, or do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I do. If you give me just a hot second, I can absolutely pull that up.
Okay. So while he's doing that, guys, Freightwaves is who Joe works with, and they will be at Matt's, and stop in and say hi to them in the booth. Mention that you saw us on there in their survey, if you would, and we'll we listen. Freightwaves, you guys came on Sirius XM as I was getting out of the truck, so I didn't really have a lot of time where I actually listened to your program. But most of the trucking radio is entertainment, not so much education. And but I did think that your guys' thing on Sunday afternoon was really, really informing, and I enjoyed listening to facts and education for a change, instead of what kind of dog you got in the truck with you. So.
Well, we do try to occupy that space, and yeah, sometimes I think we do it pretty well. Sometimes not so much, but we're constantly moving toward that. We want to be sort of this educational, like actionable insights kind of media organization for sure. Also, I do have this room here. We got a conference room B106. Okay. Rooster says it's right smack in the middle of all the action. But yeah, B106. Go say hi to those guys. They're all great.
Yeah, those conference rooms are right there in the registration desk area. When you go in to register, those conference rooms are right there. So they're not over in the trade show area. They're right there in the seminar rooms, right adjacent to where you guys register when you come in the door to the truck show.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, Joe, we appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you calling me and putting us in this article. It's interesting information. I don't ever want to sound like I'm happy about the misery that people are going through, because I'm not. We are kind of saying we told you so, but this is what happens in business. All the way back to the beginning of the Federal Reserve. Boom, bust, boom, bust, boom, bust. And what's his name? Warren Buffett. Be cautious when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are cautious. It's going to go up and it's going to go down. You better know how to run your stuff when it's down and when it's up. So we appreciate you coming on, and maybe you do some more great articles. We'll bring you back on here to talk about them. Because we love
great,
data.
yeah.
There's a data guy right there beside you. He loves him some numbers.
We all
Joe,
love numbers, yeah. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Joe, nice to meet you, and thanks for being on. Okay.
All righty, thank you.